July 11th, 1302. In that summer, one of the most shocking military upsets in medieval European history would take place. Within the fields, just outside the town of Kortrijk, known in French as Courtrai, in Flanders, modern-day Belgium, the most feared heavy knights in medieval Europe prepared to ride down a mob of peasants. The army of Philip IV of France had come to crush a rebellion. Against them stood clothworkers, blacksmiths, and farmers. Men with little to no armor, no cavalry, and little military training. At the start of the 14th century, Flanders was one of the richest regions in Europe. Its cities, Bruges, Ghent, and Ypres, dominated the textile trade. Although Flanders was technically ruled by the Guy of Dampierre, Count of Flanders, the region was under heavy pressure from the powerful King of France, Philip IV of France. Philip wanted full control of Flanders. For him, the region was simply too rich and too strategically important to remain semi-independent. Tensions grew until things soon exploded into open revolt. To restore French authority, Philip IV sent one of his most powerful nobles, Robert II of Artois. Robert assembled a large feudal army with a sizable contingent of mounted knights. French medieval knights were clad in heavy armor and mounted on powerful war horses. They could smash through infantry formations with devastating force. The French army included roughly 2,500 knights and mounted men-at-arms, several thousand infantry and crossbowmen. Many of France's greatest noble families were represented. The Flemish rebels, meanwhile, were very different. They were not professional soldiers. Their leaders included figures such as William of Jülich and Guy of Namur. Instead of cavalry, they relied on disciplined infantry armed with long spears and a brutal Flemish weapon called the goedendag. The stage was set for a confrontation near the town of Kortrijk. The Flemish commanders understood one critical fact. If the French knights could charge across open ground, the battle would be over quickly. So they chose their battlefield carefully. They positioned their army outside Kortrijk, on terrain broken by marshy ground, drainage ditches, and small streams. These obstacles would slow and disrupt cavalry. The Flemish infantry formed dense defensive lines. Their formation resembled a massive wall of pikes and spears. Behind them stood thousands more militia, ready to reinforce the line. The French opened the battle. French crossbowmen and infantry moved forward first, yet the ground slowed them. Mud, water channels, and trenches broke up their formations. The Flemish held firm behind their defensive line of pikes. French crossbowmen, now within range, raised their crossbows, took aim, and began loosing a barrage of sharp, pointed bolts into the Flemish ranks. The lightly armored Flemish troops, particularly those at the rear, took casualties. The Flemish with crossbows of their own returned fire. It was a ferocious exchange of missiles that began the day's battle.
Choose your man! I'll kill him!
The French crossbows were more numerous and had the Flemish pinned down. With their ranged troops suppressed, the French infantry formed up for battle. Thousands of French light and heavy infantry descended upon the Flemish lines. Heavy dismounted French men-at-arms, some of the finest French infantry, led the charge. The Flemish were prepared. They extended their long pikes and billhooks straight toward the direction of the charging French infantry, giving them a major reach advantage in the melee. Shields slammed together with a deafening crack as the French men-at-arms drove forward, swords hacking downward, spears thrusting through gaps in armor. Flemish infantry, mostly armed with poleaxes, billhooks and pikes, drove their weapons into any weak points they could find. Axes swung, steel rang against steel. The French were merciless in their attack. Bodies began to drop. The Flemish militias fought like men defending their homes, grim, furious, unyielding. Their long weaponry jabbed again and again into the tightly packed French ranks, forcing them back step by step. When the lines locked too close for spears, the heavy Gudendags came crashing down. Wooden clubs tipped with iron spikes that crushed helmets and shattered collarbones. An eyewitness recounts how a French sergeant surged forward, smashing his shield into a Flemish soldier and driving his sword through the man's padded gambeson. But before he could pull the blade free, a guildsman swung his Gudendag that caved in the sergeant's helmet like a broken pot. A group of French infantry attempted to break through, their heavier armor allowing them to shove into the Flemish ranks. For a moment, the line wavered. Then the townsmen closed ranks. Pikes thrust in a dozen directions, pushing back the French attack yet again. The French infantry were ordered to withdraw as the French knights, atop their heavy steeds, began galloping forward to attack the Flemish lines. Trumpets sounded. Hundreds of armored knights spurred their horses forward. The thunder of hooves shook the field as the flower of French chivalry rushed toward the Flemish militia. But the terrain dampened their momentum. Horses stumbled into ditches, the marshy soil slowed the charge. Units collided with one another as the attack lost cohesion. When the knights finally reached the Flemish line, they struck a wall of extended pikes, billhooks, and poleaxes. The Flemish militia stood shoulder to shoulder. Spears thrust forward. Gudendags swung downward. Knights were dragged from their horses and beaten to death. Once dismounted, heavily armored knights struggled to stand in the mud. Flemish soldiers swarmed them, stabbing through visors and joints in armor. In the thick of the melee, many horses stumbled and fell. Still, the knights pressed on. The battle dissolved into sluggish and brutal hand-to-hand combat. Knights who were unhorsed found themselves in grave danger. Heavy armor was effective on horseback, but on foot, in thick mud, it became vulnerable. Flemish fighters swarmed fallen knights. Using their Gudendags, they smashed through armor joints and visors. The Flemish Gudendag was the key tool in this fight, as it acted as both a spear and mace. With enough force, the Flemish militia could kill a French knight with one well-placed swing of the Gudendag. Its pointed, sharp tip was heavy enough that it could pierce a knight's chainmail armor with a well-placed strike. The French knights, with all their superior equipment and years of military training, now found themselves outmatched by a mere militia force. As the battle worsened, Robert II of Artois personally led another charge in an attempt to rally his forces. At first, his contingent of knights broke through the Flemish lines, cutting straight into the heart of the Flemish force. But before they had a chance to envelop the Flemish and potentially cause a mass panic, the Flemish commander had sprung a rapid counterattack. The Flemish counter was perfectly timed, as the militia were able to wheel around the French knights, ultimately encircling them. Militia units surged forward, pushing the disorganized French cavalry back into the marshes and streams. Robert of Artois was surrounded and killed in the fighting. With their commander dead, the French army broke. What followed was a massacre. Many French knights drowned in the marshy fields while trying to escape. Others were cut down as they fled. The Flemish infantry pursued relentlessly. By the end of the battle, thousands of French soldiers lay dead, while only a few hundred Flemish were killed. Among the fallen were dozens of high nobles of France. After the battle, the Flemish collected trophies from the field. Hundreds of golden spurs were taken from the boots of the fallen French knights. These spurs, symbols of knighthood, were hung inside the Church of Our Lady. The battlefield victory gave the conflict its famous name: the Battle of the Golden Spurs.